What we shall do.
Yeah.
I was just trying to show.
Oh.
I just wanted to read it.
All right, let's get started, folks. Don't forget to silence your gadgets. If you have any papers, they go to Mr. Curran. We'll begin with a pledge from Commissioner Volrath and a pledge of allegiance, invocation by Mr. Volrath, pledge by Mr. Curran. If you want to join us, please rise.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and ask for your presence and divine guidance as we gather together. We humbly ask you to guide our hearts and our minds in making decisions that may affect us all. We pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dave and Jim. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bell,
Here.
Curran,
Here.
Freeling. Here. Harrison.
Here.
Hinkleman.
Here.
Majerick.
Here.
Ott.
Here.
Pittsford.
Here.
Ballrath.
Here.
Werfel.
Here.
Yarborough. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Minutes from last week need to be approved. Moved by Freeling. Supported by Volrath. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Madam Clerk, I understand we have a communication.
Yes, you received an email newsletter from Clara Juggerman, Berrien County 4-H Program Coordinator, the Berrien County Spotlight 4-H Family News, April-May 2023 issue, received on April 18th. That's all.
Thank you. And we're going to circle back to requisitions now. Anybody have anything?
As I understand it, the finance committee was okay with moving the culvert purchase forward. So that is on the, does anybody have any questions about that? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. All right, public comments regarding resolutions. Comments just limited to resolutions at this point. General public comments come later in the meeting. Judge Howard, I know, is here and Judge Mayfield also, I see. We will waive the normal 2 minutes and we'll open this up to do a little Q&A in reference to the resolution ending in 4189. Judge Howard.
Good morning. Thank you, commissioners, for this time. I am the circuit judge for Berrien County, one of several, and I'm presiding over the civil division of the trial court. Obviously, you all know Judge Mayfield. It's been a while since I've been here, so it's good to see you. Those that I haven't met, good to meet you. And as presiding judge of the civil division, I can tell you I've been in the civil division since 2018. So we have seen, this is a spanning kind of a course of prior to COVID and all that we've had to deal with since COVID. But it was every time in talking with some of my predecessor judges, we've had Judge Donahue in the civil division, Judge Wiley, even Judge Schrock, who is now returned to the civil division. We all have attempted a long history of trying to address housing instability, our evictions proceedings in our courts. We average, if you weren't aware, not counting the COVID situation, between 2,300 to 2,500 eviction filings every year. It was just over 2,300, I think, or around 2,300 for 2022. And when you consider each of those locations, including at least one person and likely more than one person, oftentimes children who are attending our schools and everything else, evictions and the filings are an important impact on our community. And from a business standpoint, our landlords, housing instability impacts them when all of their time and effort, because time is money, is they can't get paid, right? You stay and you gotta pay. And so we've seen kind of us return. We used to be at 2,300. It kind of dipped during COVID because you couldn't evict anyone. We had some COVID money that assisted in that, but that was a Band-Aid. It didn't solve that problem. And what we have seen as civil division judges is that it's kind of a revolving door. And if you think it only impacts Benton Harbor and the city of Niles, you are very incorrect. Anyone can come to watch our eviction proceedings on a weekly basis, and we can only do so much in one day. We handle our North County on Fridays, every single Friday. And we have morning and afternoon dockets almost every single Friday. In Niles, all the South County, it's every Wednesday. So anyone is welcome to watch to get more information about that. But what it impacts, I guess this is a national problem, because with the courts and having a process for that is fair to both sides. I'm a judge, so I'm supposed to start in a neutral position, right? And listen to both sides. But when there are all these other components happening, it's hard to stay on top of that. And so we need help to make sure that our processes are addressing the rights and responsibilities of all the participants in this type of litigation. And it's unique, but it is also has very overriding impacts with the community to have housing instability, because it does affect children who are going to school when they don't have a place to stay or are not sure where they're going to stay. How are they supposed to perform? The Boys and Girls Club can only do so much, right? With helping our students have a good breakfast in the morning and those kind of things. So yes, it's the courts that we are looking at this to help with our processes and our procedures and the court rules, but it's a national problem. So the National Center for State Courts has a eviction diversion initiative grant program. They started it last year. And so this is round 2 of the program. And it is only for courts. So it's the National Center for State Courts that is doing it. There may be, I think what we have found where other judges have not been able to do it, and I'm also saying now we need help in getting this, is that we as judges not only are trying to stay neutral in a formal proceeding in court, but I simply don't have the time in managing a docket and everything else to also reach out to the many community partners that we have that are doing this good work. We have emergency shelter services, we have the Salvation Army, we have the United Way, we have Berrien Community Foundation. There are so many, I can't even name them all, of people that are separately connected. They're all doing little pieces of work to help with this type of housing stability issues. Corewell is, but no one is coordinating that effort. And so sometimes we have people all doing good work, but no one's coordinating, and that's where we're finding our problem. So this grant is specific, created by the National Center of State Courts to assist courts in bringing in a person or maybe 2 people called facilitators who would help reach out to all the different community partners and coordinate that effort so that the judges can do their judge job and are not having to also do that, but on the broader spectrum, to give an opportunity for our courts, who are supposed to be community leaders, to demonstrate that we are a place that can also bring about that change. And where we have, and I think Judge Mayfield is going to mention a few other efforts that we have tried, but I think it's this facilitator component of it that has been missing. Because I can call or I can tell a participant, a tenant, to call DHS or what have you done? But if they're supposed to go to 5 different places because there's so many different community resources out there, it's hard to coordinate that. And this is exactly what this grant is supposed to be for. We know at the courts and I am assuming it's like that in other departments, but we have struggled to maintain our personnel levels, our staffing. And so in approaching this grant, most of the courts around the country who have gotten this grant have hired themselves internally a facilitator. We did not feel, given our struggles with staffing at the courts, that that was a good idea to try and create another position within the county, within our court. Currently, we're just not there because we have staffing issues that we're really trying to fill. So in wanting to take advantage of this grant and looking to the need that we have for a facilitator, we feel that it's best to seek it with something unique, and we're hoping that the NCSC feels that this is a unique approach to it, that we are going to partner with some agency or some community partner out there. We need to do an RFP. I get it. We need to have the proper procedures in place, but we didn't feel that this was sustainable if it was going to be, at this time, having to create a position internally within the courts. So by entering into a partnership with somebody that could be that facilitator that would come into court and be there, understand the process that we have, so that when they're meeting with the partners, with the landlords, with the tenants, that though the needs of both sides are, how can we make this process better for landlords? How can we make this process better for the tenants? And then they bring about that change through recommendations to us. The NCSC, whoever gets to be the facilitator, also offers training, and all the facilitators around the country that are part of this program, they go to a consortium. I think last year it was in Chicago. And so you have several dozen of these facilitators all networking and coming together from across the country. And so they provide that training, and that's training that is coming back to our community. So that's just kind of in a nutshell. I know I went way over 2 minutes to introduce it, but that was going to be the approach, that it wasn't going to be, and the reason we approached it that way was not to burden the county with more staffing and that at this time, but that to use all the really good resources that we have, we just need to get them coordinated and have somebody who can be that person to contact, that is also partnering and giving information to the court so that we can make appropriate changes with our procedures and how we are docketing things, how we are handling things that work with the landlords and the tenants. I want to make this process that we have in court workable, and 2,500, 2,300 eviction cases a year is very unfortunate. It is time and money. A landlord who files that has to do that, has a filing fee, has to take their time, come down to court, has to do that every single time. And we have a backlog. I mean, we would be doing, if we had more days to fill with eviction dates, we absolutely would be processing more. That's the scary thing to me, is that right now we don't have the staffing to do that. We have staff that are trying to do this work. We have started it. We have planted the seed. I mean, there have been efforts. It's just not coordinated, and we need a coordinated effort to try and get that. And this grant would allow that. And it's no guarantee we're going to get it. So this was our idea. I'll let Judge Mayfield, if I didn't talk over her, what she was planning on saying, and then I'll answer any questions that you have.
Well, before we go to you, Judge Mayfield, you mentioned other counties around the country. My understanding is Ingham and Kent County in Michigan are already doing this. Some counties in the great state of Texas are doing it, and somewhere out west,
Kansas City.
Yeah.
I think there's one in Washington State. I didn't bring the map with me, but most of the states have only one. So that's another reason why, and both, I can tell you, both Kent County and Ingham County, and it's in their district courts, they hired in their own facilitator. So they are actually a staff member of that district court. And so we are going to be different. And I'm hoping that being different, since we would be the third court in Michigan, which is, I'm thinking Texas is maybe the only other state, possibly California, that has, and they're much larger than we are, that has more than one court currently under this grant. So we needed to kind of, I think, at this point, so since we're competing with courts, state and local courts across the country, it's open to every court to apply. So if they're trying to get kind of a broad brush of, and I don't know who else is going to apply, but there were hundreds of courts we were required to attend these webinars to get information before we could apply. And there was a Q&A part. There were hundreds of people I attended both sessions, and it was virtual, but you could see there were hundreds of people attending. And so it's popular. I think they had speakers from existing facilitators speak, including the one from Ingham County, very well-spoken individual. We are just in a unique situation, but I'm hoping that the uniqueness of our application in asking for a partnership with an outside organization will kind of be a highlight, and they'll say, hey, here's another way of doing it. That's not the traditional way of hiring in. And we have kind of 2 years to see if this works and I would hope it's supported. But we don't know because it's a startup grant.
Sure.
So that was kind of the approach. So
The court remains an impartial tribunal in this process. There's no favoring landlord or tenant. It's
Right.
assisting with the facilitation. There's no general fund obligation, as I think was noted last week, and we would not anticipate that there would be a general fund obligation. That's why we have places like BCF and Corwell and Whirlpool and others who can help. Michigan Gateway. I would expect fully, if this thing gets up and running and runs well, it won't be a problem getting the funding to keep it going. But any questions for Judge Howard before we move to Judge Mayfield? Ma'am.
Couple of questions, actually. I want to make sure that because we do have current case managers, the COVID dollars that were available to keep people from being evicted, to pay landlords or whatever, were very ripe with fraud. I was involved in the Community Action Agency, and they were reporting fraud all the time to the state level. So I think it's very important that somebody, if there's a case manager for this, that it's somebody that does work in that realm, so that we make sure that we're not now involved in fraud that's going on from potentially tenants or whoever, or even landlords that might be rigging a system of some sort. So with that said, I want to make sure that we include the HARA in the process, whether it's for hiring that case manager, whether it's from them or they're at least involved in, so that there is some connection to that state program
Right.
as well. And then lastly, my actual question, I guess, is what is the measurement for success?
Well, I should tell you also, one of the requirements under the grant, if you get it, is that you have to share data. And one of the positive things that I was seeing is that, so they want to kind of take in the data so they can see what types of evictions are happening. This really is to apply to residential. There are also commercial, evictions and things like that. This is really one that is looking at residential impacts and eviction proceedings. So the facilitator is also required to report certain numbers, but then it also feeds back so that we have actual data to support actions that this county wants to take, whether it's through different agencies or not. But it gives us the data to know, do we need extra magistrates? Do we need, because I can tell, for instance, Citizens Mediation Service, they are our local alternate dispute resolution appointer, right? But they're also a private kind of nonprofit agency out there. They've always been around. We always offer through our pretrial process of telling people since 2018, and I've been involved in this, that we tell people Citizens Mediation Service is out there to assist. in my time, there isn't one case that has ever used citizens mediation service. So there are community resource that would remove kind of a case and have it be handled through an office here locally. We have many, retired judges and other attorneys that want to help, whether it's through volunteering or not, to help mediate things. But these cases just have never gone there. What is the reason for that? I don't know, but it would be nice to have a facilitator who is working on that, to finding out the reason. But we need the data to know that. And we just, other than the number of filings, I can pull that up. The circumstances behind those filings are more difficult to analyze when we don't have somebody who's pulling that data. So in
So
terms,
the measurement is then less cases, or?
I
That's
think
what
it's
I'm
whatever
looking for.
I think there can be a number of goals set for it. But for the courts, it would be to improve our processes, make recommendations, whether it's to the state level, whether it's to legislation in terms of evictions. But you need the information if you're going to make a recommendation on things. You need to have the information. Right now, we don't have the information. So that's why this is a startup grant. That's why this is to kind of see more of what we need in this community and what we need in the court to make, maybe we could make better staffing decisions if our clerks were addressing, if we were working better. And we can't tell because we are constantly just waiting on filings, finding docket space, trying to churn them. And there's no one kind of looking at the data to see how many of these are ending up in default judgments, how many of them are getting legal aid. You can talk to legal aid. They can apply for the grant. Like, there were people on this webinar asking if can we just have our local legal aid do it? No, their answer was no, it has to go through the courts. But legal aid is one of our partners. They're there at every court hearing. They can't take every case too, but maybe if they had the data too, they could go back to the state in terms of who funds them and say, we need a larger legal aid office, or we need this. So it's not just the courts, but it does start with the courts in that we have kind of a processing problem, and to know that somebody has to file. Once they file, there's a certain amount, they've been given notice, and just to understand the whole process, once you get your hearing, then if they're not disputing and they want to enter into an agreement, usually it's 10 days, or even if they don't. So we're talking about less than 30 days that somebody from filing kind of to a decision that the court is supposed to make, to actually evict somebody, to sign a piece of paper to tell the sheriff's deputy to go to that location and remove all of their stuff and anyone who's there. That's a short timeline. You're talking about putting somebody out on the street. And so that's important information to have if it's happening on a regular basis. I'm not saying the eviction itself happens on a regular basis, but our courts are currently burdened with a lot of filings. And can we be smarter in how we are handling those? I think we can, but I don't have the data to say why or how to fix it if I don't know what types of cases are getting filed and who is impacted. What areas, like I said, anyone who watches our proceedings, anyone that has a mobile home park, for instance, in your community. If you have one, we have eviction cases almost weekly. And so why is that? I don't know, but I don't have the information. So a performance base is hard for me to define for you. I apologize. But for us, our focus is on bringing justice to all and doing it in a fair and equitable way, and also to maintain a high level of performance from our staff, including me, including my fellow colleague in the civil division. We want to do the best job that we can, and to kind of stay in our lane in what we're supposed to do, but be a community leader and let people know that there are these resources out there, but everybody working individually maybe doesn't capitalize on those resources the best way. And so if this is a starting point, with the goal of, yes, reducing the formal filings, maybe having a better process of pre-filing information for landlords and tenants. So that I envision an educational component eventually, but we have to kind of get a handle on where are we right now? I know we are very busy in the area of, there's a stack in the clerk's office any given time that is literally this thick. And we had one designated clerk that just handled landlord tenant, and she moved away. They haven't filled that spot yet since last like July. So what I'm saying, it is impacting our current staff and the morale of our current staff in trying to process things when everybody else is also doing that on a daily basis. So I think it's to really help our staff, our processes to get that sorted out, but that's not the only goal. But I think there's a lot of positives that could come up that. So until we got a facilitator in there, I'm not sure I can set a parameter of what all the only primary performance review would be, what marker I'm looking for. I'm thinking in a county our size, I don't know, is 2,300 eviction filings a year, is that good? Is that, I don't know, but we've always hovered around that. And it would be nice to know that if we saw a reduction in that, that's because our communities are more stable in their housing. And I think there's a correlation to it. I'm sorry, I can't answer it more specifically.
Yes, sir.
If you could just help me understand this position, this facilitator would work with different organizations, community-based organizations in the community, and help them effectively communicate with the courts and understand where we are currently and where there might be places for improvement. Is that kind of the baseline of what this is?
Well, yes, that's one of the things that they are supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, most of the facilitators that have been hired under this grant are actual employees of the court. So the idea is that person may work for a different agency or organization, but they are placed in our building and they would be attending our hearings. They would be meeting with the judges to inform them. And it's a little bit different, but I'd like to kind of compare it to the treatment courts that I preside over, okay? We have people that are on probation, they're in our special program. We have people that are on probation and they're just regular. So we have regular eviction, and then we have people that are part of this. And in my treatment courts, I'm still the judge. I still have to do certain things with the legal proceedings, but I have probation officers, I have representatives from the prosecutor's office, they all have different interests. I have people from Riverwood, I have people from the health department. All these different people are part of a team and we collaborate. But if we don't meet and get that information, and I have a case manager in each of my courts. So in treatment courts, if I didn't have that case manager and everybody is just communicating among themselves and with this participant, I would never know when I'm meeting with them what to ask them, how their days go, like how to help and support them. So I kind of view this eviction facilitator kind of in the same way as a case manager for our eviction cases, all of our filings. And in order to do that, I need them reporting to the judges, here's the docket, here's all the filings that you have this week, here's what's going on in those cases, and follow up with the landlords and say what's going on, follow up with the tenants, what is going on, and then sharing that information so that we can make fully informed decisions, just like the parties can make fully informed decisions. Yes.
So that leads to another question. I worked at the Center for Better Health as a case manager,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked before the SARA funding came, during, and then after.
Mm-hmm.
I saw lots of need in people who utilized that program. I also saw the fraud.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things, if I was in that facilitator position, I would recommend probably something that I don't know if the courts could act on. I don't believe there is enough resources in the communities to try to help with this problem. So that's my question to you. What if this facilitator recommends or says, I'm looking at the docket, I'm looking at all these cases. It is just that there is not a social safety net strong enough to deal with that.
Yeah, do you want to address that? Okay.
Any other questions for Judge Howard before we?
Well, I'll just stand here and let her talk, and so if one of us can answer it better than the other.
Okay.
All right, certainly.
All right, thank you. Good morning. I didn't think I was going to have to make notes. It was going to be, but it got to the point. So if you're taking any notes, I'm going to give you like 4 things I'll start with, and then I'll explain my perspective and how that comes into. If you write the words access to justice, you write collaboration, you write strategic planning, and you write sustainability. That's what this program is about. And that's what I am adamantly encouraging you to support this morning, so you can, and I'll explain in the understanding. So access to justice. I started with so this is a perspective. I started with the task force from the Supreme Court with access to justice back in 2018. I'm now a commissioner, okay, with the Access to Justice Commission. One of those, I'm in a different group. I'm in a welcoming and reimagining courthouses. That's my co-group. There's another group that dealt with specifically the issue of eviction diversion, okay? There are lots of others, I'll just stick with that. But that group, because of my excitement with what is contemplated by the Supreme Court and by our court as it stems down, we are not just punitive to send people, for purposes of incarceration. That's criminal. This is regarding civil justice, and that there is access to it, and that's for everybody who plays a part in that. Commissioner Elliott mentioned about I pulled up some words you said about remaining an independent arbitrator or tribunal. That's just what the court is. We don't have other options. We are always independent for whatever person comes in, plaintiff, defendant, petitioners, respondent, because we are triers of fact only. We don't have a position. If you have a position that's contrary to what would be independent, then you disqualify yourself because you can't perform your oath. Okay, so that, from that perspective, that for me is an absolute no-brainer. Yes, we are independent. We don't have any favorites. And HARA, you asked about that. Put a note, and I drew my arrow to collaborative, okay? Anyone in this community who can be of assistance would be a part of that collaborative effort, okay? What is it? Rising tide, more hands, less work, any of those you want to make apply. But that's also part of the court now, to be perceived as just that, a collaborator. That's what we are here for. I've told people over and over when I go out, you actually need to look at the back of that ballot and determine who your judges are. Federal government, it has its impact, yes, but these are the people who are going to make decisions that will generally impact your life most significantly, all right? So we want to be in the community, and I believe the court, and I'm hopeful that I can't get ahead of it because I'm secret squirrel, I can't release it yet, but they're working on what will be the work product from our last year that's going to talk about the mission of the one court of justice, the Supreme Court, how that impacts us. And I can tell you it will have to do a different face, a different perception of who we are and what we do. And much of that is going to be in the community to ensure that every individual realizes if there's a need that falls within, and you heard Judge Howard talk, housing, okay, if it's debt collection, whatever, there are things that affect, and it comes through the court. And we want to be a part of the resolution for all of that civil access. The WINS program is something that you probably would not have been aware of. There's my friend, Commissioner Harrison. He's familiar with that. As I said, I came back off of this very excited. I was not in that work group, but it's Judge Ward from Ingham County, who had one of the first of these grants that she was engaged with. And she was on that particular work group. So I'm not surprised that, that she was one of the first with last year's grouping. But they did supported work, had different folks come in, do surveys, a lot of different things. And I tagged on with her because Ingham County is very different. Okay, you know that landscape from Berrien County. And what I wanted to try to ensure as well was that the work that they were doing as a work group would also capture a community like ours, very different from the Ingham setup. And so, yes, there were some people who did do some, because I asked, did do some work. Groups had a plan in place, the strategy of it, interviewed, had participation for just some identified landlords, for some identified tenants. That was easy enough to do because that's all public records there within the court. And there was a person who was involved with the Sarah, who got, I think, a pretty eye-opening revelation of how a lot of that worked. You are absolutely correct. There was fraud on both sides of the arena, okay? Court has nothing to do with that other than be upset and not even able to speak about it at some points. But yes, that occurred. Much of that had to do with because there was the dispensing of funds. Solution, what there is, this is not about dispensing funds. This is about a facilitator who will come in, and I respectfully disagree with you in terms of that there are not enough resources here. There are more than sufficient resources. There are more than a number of people who are ready and willing. That's where the strategy and the collaboration comes in. There are people who have desires and don't have the direction. That doesn't mean that that can't be implemented. Part of this facilitator is going to be a person I trust who is going to have the heartbeat of the community, who is going to be able to go out and do just that. When Judge Howard said we, worked very hard on trying to establish that, is that it's not someone even perceived as just the court personnel, but someone who is perhaps perceived more collaborative with the court, who is out with the community, all of those who have interest as it relates to housing. Everybody has an interest. Educators want children. If you know anything about the broken glass pane, if your pane is broken at home, that's an indicator for someone that that child in that home is going to suffer more so than others in some educational challenges. If in fact you are not able to maintain your housing because you're trying to choose that between transportation for your work, all right, and you all know what transportation has been in Berrien County. All of these are things that a facilitator, hopefully, is going to be able to dig in very deeply, have a concept of the terrain of the community in collaboration with the court and all of the work and willingness that we want to do within the parameters that we have. Judge Howard, I think she mentioned that through this, Sarah, there were some things that were added, pre-trials, there were other things, but it doesn't stymie what I believe is the innovation that Berrien County has always had, the creativity to work within the framework, justice for all, but that justice also includes hopefully resolution, that you walk away, that's the end goal, you walk away served. So the access to justice piece is kind of the prism, from which I look at it. Everybody, like I said, there is no, whoever you are in the court system, you have the access to it, and we want to have a solution base. The strategy is necessary for that strategic planning. The collaboration is going to be pivotal and key, and that's the sustainability. What's measurable? I've been in Berrien County now for 43 years. I started at Berrien County Legal Services. My first cases were before Judge Black on the first floor of that building for eviction, all right? Things were different then in different ways. However, things are still the same. We have instability in housing. We have difficulty. If housing were less of an issue, I can guarantee you there are several other community issues that we are involved with that would be also less of an issue. I think we have an absolute perfect opportunity now, which is why I get a lot of stuff over my desk. As Judge Howard has said, there have been discussions before for a number of years on how to deal with and STEM. So when this popped up on my computer and went, wow, I think this is perfect because I think we've already done this. this was the WINS program that in collaboration with the Berrien Community Foundation, they would be a partial supporter of this because they got on board with it. We started it. Measurable? No, because there was not a facilitator. There was a person who was working through ESS and with Sarah, who was kind of sort of doing this other piece too. And were there people helped? Absolutely. Seniors here in Berrien County have significant issues as it relates to housing. For instance, that you can stay in a same building and one person be paying, I think Judge Howard, $1,000 a month. And that's more than a quarter of their sustained Social Security, and somebody else is paying a lesser amount. Is that equal access? Probably perceived not right off, okay? But those are the types of things that people were able to get into. Those things were brought forward. We made some successes. Yes, we did. But no, not measurable because of Sarah, and that it was at that point about a moratorium, not evicting to some degree, everybody having all this flow of money. What's the measure? That it changes. All right, part of this, the idea is that you're gonna learn financial education, you know, how to budget. If you don't know how to budget, that's a real problem, okay? You get all of those type of services in place to assist the individual to move from here to here. That was one of the things that they said in the webinar that was, I believe, why I think they're on board now. We're not doing the same thing. We're trying to move people from here to here. And if you do that within a community and get several groups of people moving from here to here, anybody got an idea of what happens within the community? From here to here. Not a hard, I don't do NASA work, not a hard concept, okay? With that, try to run through it very quickly. And I didn't have my glasses, which means I really can't see. No, I'm pretty sure it may not help. I don't think I missed anything that I wrote down quickly for that. If there are any questions, certainly.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
So my understanding is we're gonna hire another person to work with the landlord and the tenant, try to come up with a resolution before going to court.
That was more, I don't know if you want to say, that was really more the Sarah concept.
Well, and that's only one option and component. I mean, they talked about several phases. They talked about a pre-litigation phase that eventually these facilitators would be involved with. But is that because, and something as simple as maybe changing the current form. Maybe we use a different form that's in our already existing self-help center, so that the landlords know how to I can't tell you how many times we've either had to adjourn a hearing or I've had to dismiss a case and say, you got to refile because you didn't give them the proper notice to begin with. And that was correct, but when it was just really the landlord didn't know how to do it himself, right? So I think when we're talking about pre-litigation, it could be something as simple as a form that the facilitator would work on and we would, propose. It doesn't necessarily have to do with mediation, but it could, like, try to get them to Citizens Mediation Service if they're, without, and then it kind of removes it from the court. So that's ideal for us because then it's less of a filing. Once it's filed, then what is the procedure and what are the timelines? And that person would be the contact for DHS, for ESS, who by the way is done, has worked very hard with the courts. They still come into court because they got a separate, after Sarah ended, they got separate funding. So they're trying as well. So they're out there doing it. But what I'm saying is there are just too many. I hear so many people are going to DHS, then they're going to emergency social services, then they're talking to their church, then they're talking, and they might only, we need somebody who's coordinating that and answering the questions that can come up that maybe will alleviate further hearings or at least get them on a track so that it's not also cyclical. Because in the course of, especially since COVID, the Sarah money served its purpose in those that rightfully needed it, and it was really unfair to the landlords too, right? What to say, CDC says you can't evict anybody, but if that's their livelihood, landlords are business people too. If that's their business, we want our small businesses to be successful. And they weren't being successful during COVID until they could get that funding, if they were getting it properly, right? I'm not excusing the fraud that happened, certainly, but the facilitator would be in all of those stages. So they wouldn't act as the facilitator. They're the coordinator that would get them pieced into maybe those other avenues, if that answers your question.
So pre and post, just what you said there, I think there are a lot of people out there. It's like we're moving into food, needs and all. There are a lot of people doing a lot of different things, but that's what I mean by strategy. There must be a strategic plan and an understanding.
Yeah, the fishing pole, not the fish.
Yeah.
Approach. I think Commissioner Freeling.
So I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm glad that you were here to be able to explain this. Last week when I had heard about it. Oops.
I'll take that phone. I think that's what I do.
You gotta do that in your court. We don't get to do that here.
No, yeah,
Sorry.
I appreciate you being here this week to kind of give a little more insight. Last week when I had heard this process, I said there's something that exists here in Berrien County that could potentially be that linchpin for us. There is the Housing Resource Network. It's a group of all the agencies that come together, collaborate, and try to get that coordinated service put together. We do have the HARA. For those who aren't aware of what that stands for, it's an acronym, the Housing Assessment and Resource Agency. It's state appointed for that continuum of care coordination. And so I can see this being something that would be very beneficial to be able to help with that coordination and be able to point individuals to the service. What was concerning to me last week was hearing that there was talk of having one community agency being sort of thought of as being that point, and it may not have been the best fit. And so hearing that we're talking about doing the RFP, this is simply to go out for the grant. This is simply to be able to ask for it.
Right.
And then we're going to circle back to be able to
Correct.
have the rest of that conversation.
Right.
Absolutely.
If the NCSC doesn't like that approach that we have in terms of partnering as opposed to hiring in, they did say you can do it. They said it could be through a third party, but the court has to be, we have to have input and oversight of that position. So it really is going to be a collaboration with an agency, and it could be through the ones that you just mentioned too. Instead, if they're already doing the work, maybe they are the most qualified to provide that facilitative service. And then we'll have to see where since they're already doing that work, they're just not doing the work with the court, right? We don't have that connection.
Correct.
And so if this is a way to whichever agency steps up and is the best fit for us to receive that kind of input and that collaboration, and the NCSC agrees with us that this is the best approach for our court, I think we're going to be less expensive than some of these bigger communities. If Wayne County is applying, their overhead and stuff to budget that is going to be pretty high. So they may be asking for multiple facilitators. So I'm hoping that, and they made it clear that you could be super small, you could be super large. So it really is going to be on a need based, and I'm hoping this approach. If they don't like this approach, then we're back to, okay, we know there's still a need, and we gotta go to plan B. But this was an opportunity to get that startup and then work on the support for a sustainability plan in our community.
And I would just say, Commissioner, just on that, you've identified, both of you, different organizations that are under an umbrella. And yet, okay, so from that perspective, when, as I said, strategically, you look at and say, what is missing? And part of that really is the collaboration and work with the court. This grant fully allows for that. It's not taking anyone outside of what should be their mantra in terms of what their directive is. It really should be a pulling together of, oh, wait a minute, we really are all somewhat on the same page, need to be moving in the same direction, and that there is a link with the court pre and post to kind of help support that through this facilitator. That's why I say I believe, honestly, with that, there's a real hope. You're going to see, I trust, significant change. And it won't be something that will be so far out, distant into the future that you won't be able to recognize that.
Yeah, I manage apartments, and this is the way I perceive it, that when I've had to evict, and take COVID out, because that was terrible. I mean, 2.5 years I had a tenant I couldn't get out, and I finally got him out, but the way it is you give them the pay and stay 7-day notice. Then after that, they sign that, they get it, you can file with the courts, which take a week or two for them to send it to the tenant. And then they say there's 30 days from that date to respond, to show up to court. After that, the judge then said, okay, you're getting an eviction, that's another 30 days for them to get out. And they've already missed probably 2 months of payment before you've taken the court. So now we're in at 5 months. Now, after that, they don't leave. The eviction notice came, they don't leave, they stay there, they're happy. I have to contact the sheriff. That can take another 30 to 45 days to get him on the docket to go and stand there, and you have to hire a crew to come in and take their furniture out. Well, usually they're moving out that day that the sheriff shows up. And so they got most of the stuff out. So the crew standing around, you have to pay them. Plus you have to pay the sheriff $300 or $200 to show up just to stand there to help them move out. So it takes 6-7 months to get somebody out. And that's the way I've done it, and it's happened several times. I don't know why you say there's 30 days, but anyway, if this, and I've never heard citizens mediation services, when I've been filing all this, they've never told me that, or your human resource. They never mention any of that. They just say, this is how you file, this is how you file, this is how you file. So if this funding gets somebody in here to help us, the tenant or us, clarify all that,
Right.
I'm all for that. But if it's to extend the eviction any longer, I'm not for that.
Right, no, and that's the whole thing. You shouldn't have to go through all of that when it's an impossibility, right? To if they have funding, if there are resources to pay, and you want them to stay, because you own the property. So if you want to get, if somebody's been a bad tenant, then there's a process for that too. If you really just want to get them out, you give them 30 days notice and they don't have a good excuse. Like you can kick somebody out. You don't have to wait for a non-payment. You don't have to do those things if you give them proper notice. But what I'm saying is the process from the landlord is just as onerous. And why should you, if you can do it faster, and if all the steps are taken, and if you do it the right way, it shouldn't take 7 months. So there's a problem there. If that's what your experience is, then you can imagine how many other landlords in this community are going through the same thing. Absent COVID, because that was just,
Different.
hopefully an anomaly. But we're trying to build off of, learn lessons from what that created, and know that, this week I'd had somebody show up and say, well, I'm going to apply for Sarah. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, people have that in their mind that they're going to get another handout, We want to, if there are resources out there to have somebody get a hand up and a help up to their circumstance, but we are not taking money to give to other people. Like I just need help with, and I think my colleague Judge Schrock, we just need help in managing that process. I would like to see that process not take you 7 months if they should have been out within 30 days because they didn't pay their rent. Because our judgments say, once you get your judgment, they have 10 days to pay. 10 days. So if it takes 4 more months after that, something didn't go right. And
Well,
we want
they
to
just
correct
don't
that.
leave, and you can't take them out. You just can't do that. And you
If
go
you have
to,
an order from the court that directs the sheriff to do it, that you can.
well, that, yeah, then you, but that takes 2 months to get that.
It shouldn't. I mean, that's what the law is. So that's the process. Those are some of the things we are hoping that a facilitator working with us will hear. Because when we're on the record, we can't sit down and take that time. When I've got 30 files, I've got to call in a span of a couple hours. So I need a facilitator or a coordinator or case manager, whatever you want to call them, to not be advocating for any, but kind of advocating for the court, to give us the information that we need to make better processes in our court. And if it also benefits our community by exposing them to the programs, educating them to the programs, communicating with schools so that they can take the steps they need to make sure that our children are safe and are in an environment that they can learn, let them do that. One of the facilitators from another state that spoke at the first one talked about one of the program, and this was after being in the program for, is that they would take the filings and share that with the school system. And if that child was in the school system, they could take steps to do what they need to do from kind of a social services standpoint to make sure that child's okay. Because if they're behaving a certain way or whatever, it's a sharing of information, but there's confidentiality reasons, there's all sorts of things. But that was one of the things that they said has been impactful, in that their schools knew if a child, potentially was under the stress of an eviction filing. And then you just leave it to them to handle that appropriately. But if they don't know and that child shows up and is not doing their homework, is not stressed, you don't know where that child slept out last night. If their family is figuring out where they're going to go next. So it does impact more than just, those people that show up in my court. I know that. And that's just one simple example of how it can have an outreach to others.
Thank you so very much
Thank you.
for the opportunity to present, for listening. I am a communicator. I am collaborative. If there are ever questions, I think communication is key. So I am very open at any point for that.
Thank you. And this was certainly illuminating, informative, much appreciated. Jim.
Yes, thanks, Mac. This is an administration committee resolution. And as it worked its way through the process, there were many questions raised by the commissioners here. I want to thank Judge Howard and Chief Judge Mayfield for being here and to explain the resolution and answer questions. I think it was very, very helpful. And I also want to thank the chair for allowing them to have the time to do that.
Thank you very much.
Again, I think that was very helpful in getting this resolution passed. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments about resolutions on the agenda? And I would note, if you flip over the first page, there is an added resolution that has to do with accepting the equalization report. So that would be considered part of the agenda as well for public comment purposes. Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the consent calendar. Haven't been asked to pull anything, so is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as submitted, including the added resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Curran, is there support? Supported by Volrath. Is there discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Curran,
Yes.
Freeling.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Hinkleman.
Yes.
Majerick.
Yes.
Ott.
Yes.
Pittsford.
Yes.
Walrath.
Yes.
Werfel.
Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, you have 11 yeas.
thank you. And given that Commissioner Yarbrough's in Europe, that constitutes a unanimous vote, and I think we're ready to move on. Finance Committee, John.
I'll be very brief. Committee met today and we talked, we had one waiver request for some radios from Jill Adams at Parks. And it amounts to half of the radios that they need. They wanted to get approved on a purchase. It's in their budget. They can work right now. They want to switch to digital, these radios, because we're going to use them in combination with the other radios. Telerad can program them so that they can be used in analog fashion, and so they'll work together with us, and so we very readily approve that. The resolutions that we passed, you guys have already voted on, equalization, we paid the bills. There was a maintenance cost on a printer that we approved last week of just shy of $290, and that's in the budget to approve. We had a lot of discussion then about the cement structure that the road department is going to use. I think everybody's been briefed on that. Unfortunately, only one person bid on it. It came in substantially over budget. We're disappointed about that. Disappointed also about the fact that we're required to put in something like that rather than a corrugated structure, but we approved it, and we'll move forward with the project as the road department can. That's my report.
Thank you. Questions for finance? All right, PHS, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also met today. We approved a number of resolutions that will come to you next week. One regarding the March per diems. Second, the acceptance of the Spark grant for the Parks Department. Renewal of the contract with King Media, that comes through the Health Department. And then last but not least is the travel expense policy. So you will receive a summary of the changes, the policy, and then the resolution, and that will go to you immediately. And I implore you to read it, look at it, think about it, and communicate any questions you have. We also had a review of the veteran services. There's a number of issues that they brought to our attention, and we've directed them to our administrator and legal counsel for clarification. We had our monthly update from Jill Adams regarding the Parks Department, and we also entertained our administrator talking about the Point of Woods project. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions for personnel? All right, Jim.
Thank you, Mac. First thing we had was Robert Ray, who talked to us about the two positions, the upgrades, that then he came to PHS. Most of our time was spent with Daniel B. and Paula. What we received was a printout similar to this one, and they have it listed in categories. There's 5 categories. Number 1 being life and safety. If there's a condition that falls under life and safety issue, it's listed as number 1. Number 2 is any code violation or law violation. Number 3 is deferred maintenance. That's those items that have been deferred for years and now have gotten to the top of the list where we have to deal with them. So number 3 is deferred maintenance. Number 4 are operational changes, and 5 is to improve the employee's experience. So we got this printout, which is listed by facility, by building. What we asked for is this list listed by critical need. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because right now, from the presentation, there's really only enough money to cover 1, 2, and 3. So we want to see and prioritize 1, 2, and 3. And then what we will do is this week, we will digest that information. Any questions or clarifications that we need, we're going to send, the committee will send an email to Brian with our concern, question, what have you. Brian will then forward it to Daniel, and he will address it. And so between now and next Thursday, hopefully we have done all of that. That process is complete. And then we are going to meet again next Thursday with Daniel B. and go over anything else that needs to be explained or critiqued. Once we have done all of that, then we are going to have Daniel B. do a presentation for us at the night meeting in New Buffalo. So that way, the whole board will be brought up to speed on exactly what this list entails. And then also any of the public that shows up will be aware of our efforts in taking care of our buildings. So unless you have something to add to that, Brian, that's pretty well the process.
Perfect summary.
Okay, very good. So we will have something for you next Thursday, and we will have a lot more for you at the night meeting in New Buffalo. That's our report.
Questions for admin?
Just want to thank Brian and Jill for attending the meeting that we had with the city of St. Joe talking about Silver Beach.
Speak up.
I said I just wanted to thank Brian and Jill for attending the meeting that we had at the city of St. Joe. We had some discussion about Silver Beach parking, some things to look forward to in the next couple of years. So thank you to Brian and Jill.
To the board, it should be noted that meeting occurred this week, and during that meeting, it was pouring snow.
No report.
No report.
Okay, let's see. Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, we had that meeting this week. Berrien County Historical Association, they had their annual meeting this week, very well attended. I attended a meeting with Daniel B. regarding the 911 EOC building. It was a good discussion, at least getting that conversation started for the building for the 911 and EOC. So it's a good start, good conversation. That's my report.
Monday, I drove up to Lansing in the blizzard, the last blizzard of the year. It was the worst drive I've had this winter.
You should have
It was
stayed in
last
St.
Monday,
Joe.
40-mile-an-hour winds and snowing sideways, and all the trucks are out on Monday, so it was fun. But we did have a presentation by one of the court administrators, and basically on the different types of court funding, and a lot of it are things that we've seen before, but we did have, we're still getting more and more people coming to the actual meetings instead of Zooming, and which is nice, and we had conversations about the additional costs that are coming with the red flag laws, some of the laws that are getting passed on those fronts. The elections, the early voting, things like that are gonna cause concerns for everybody, and those costs are coming, and we really don't know what they are, but everybody knows they're coming, so that was my report.
Won't be cheap. I stayed home and did my MAC HHS committee meeting on Zoom, because I didn't want to drive.
We had some people up there that were bold.
Yeah. So we had a HHS meeting this week, pretty much talking platforms still. They're trying to finalize all the platforms so that those will be done by May is, I think, their deadline they're looking at. So probably a lot of discussion on it next week at the MAC Legislative Conference that a number of us are going to. Looking forward to that starting Monday. Also at the Planning Commission, we just talked about new grant opportunities and some, items that are coming down through the infrastructure bill that the Planning Commission will be working on. Terry may elaborate more on it, but I mean, we were just kind of tossing out ideas. It wasn't anything getting finalized. So that's my report.
Your report, I have a question.
Sir.
And I'm not sure if it's Dave or Julie. You talked about early voting and some of the additional responsibilities placed on the county clerk. Is there money available? Are they gonna be reimbursed for that, or do we have to cover that?
Right now, we're covering it. There's just.
Unfunded
We gotta
mandate.
Okay.
They might help with calculators, and then probably mainly go to the local, but they're working on drafting the law, and that'll be probably one of the last steps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last week we had a brownfield meeting, and there's not much to report there. We're in budget and all projects are moving forward. I guess 7-Eleven bought out Speedway, so they're unclear how fast that's gonna move. But it is moving forward. And then last night, Commissioner Bell and I went to the Berrien Mental Health Authority. And they hired a new child psychologist, from Detroit, which I guess is a big kudos, because a lot of health authorities have lost there. So we're getting one in, and that's pretty amazing, I guess. And they had two just passed their exams. Other than that, they did their financial audits and the company passed them with flying colors and they passed their CARV audit, which rates mental health authorities across the country. We're one of the top in the country in the audit. So that's all I have to report.
It was an excellent report.
Thank you.
I too attended the Brownfield meeting. I was late to it. I was having some follow-up from our general board meeting. Commissioner Warfel was there as well. So things are moving along on Brownfield. I too attended Southwest Michigan Planning Commission on Tuesday, and to kind of expound a little bit on the projects that Southwest Michigan Planning Commission is working on with the infrastructure funding. They have been tapped to be the coordinator for our region for any of the grant opportunities as the MPO for the region. And so some of the ideas that were kind of being tossed out and nothing has really stuck, but looking at transportation, looking at housing, looking at solar, smart grid, food bank hub, kind of value added ideas of what we have within Berrien County. So it's something that we could be looking at as a county of what we may want to introduce to Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. They're going to take the top one or two or three ideas, roll it into a submission to the federal government for that funding. And so that will be coming more on that. That's my report. Thank you.
Brian.
Okay, so it's been mentioned that some of you are going to Lansing next week. In the back, anyone heading to Lansing, there are booklets. Annette's got them right there. Do not leave without grabbing your booklet. There are extras that I'm going to ask that someone take with. Those are intended to be handed off to members of the legislature. So the booklets are a rehash of a lot of stuff you've already seen, but the front sheets are the ones that are important. So we've had Daniel B. just offer a cover letter, just speaking to the inflationary effect on building pricing. And then as you go to pages like 2, 3, 4, that's just a quick summary, like a one pager on the needs at the jail, EOC 911, juvenile center. So a lot of it's a rehash, and quite frankly, I've handed this to Senator Nesbitt a couple of times, but squeaky wheel gets the grease, so we'll make sure they're on his front door. So that's item one. Item two is Commissioner Henkelman mentioned that in finance, the finance committee approved the purchase of what turned out to be a very expensive culvert. As way of background to the board, to the public, the culvert is tied to a culvert collapse that occurred at Point of Woods. Chairman asked that I just make sure everyone's aware. Road Department's been working actively with the homeowners as well as the golf course to ensure easy access to the homes as the culvert is out of drivable condition. Staff at Roads have let me know that state of Michigan through the former DEQ, now Eagle, has agreed to allow a temporary roadway, temporary culvert to be placed. What that means for us is we'll be working in tandem on the long-term repair using that incoming concrete culvert, and then on a short-term fix. The importance of this is it ensures that about 14 households have access to their homes. It also ensures that we've got easy access for public safety. More on that will be coming. I'll meet with Roads tomorrow to review exactly what they're planning for the temporary fix. And then we'll report it back to the full board, just so you all are aware of what's happening out there. As we've stated over the last 2 weeks, we appreciate the cooperation of the homeowners as well as the golf course in allowing the golf cart paths to be used for temporary access. Anything you want added, sir?
No.
Okay, those are my comments.
Okay, general public comments now are in order. Anything under the sun, preferably within 2 minutes. And if you have something to say, we just need your name and your town. And if you go up to where the microphone is, the World Wide Web can hear you as well. Where the microphone is. This gentleman knows the way.
Elder Hager Township. Got a comment to make on, with people, judges that were here. You know, I suggested this before, because you don't listen to me. You know, you guys can question whoever's giving the speech, or somebody shows something up there. We in the audience should be able to ask questions about that too, or not wait until the last 2 minutes or the last minute. You know, where are they? Now, if I want to make some comments, maybe I got some questions for them. Where are they? You're denying us that right. Maybe you don't think of that. We're just a bunch of cattle here, right? At least we got a few more people here than we did last week. Another thing is, you guys are a monopoly. You know what a monopoly is? It's illegal out there. Whirlpool's not a monopoly. Start a business, you're not a monopoly. You guys are a monopoly. And they're illegal out there, but it's all right for you guys to be a monopoly. No, that's what they have when you have a dictator. That's about basically what you guys are. You know, you tell us with all your things that you come out with. No, you make the laws, and then you got a cop. Oh, he's not here. You got a cop back there enforcing the law, and you got a lawyer over there too. What do we got here? You got a couple of people here, and we don't have any rights at all. No, this is not you're not a democracy. You're not supposed to be, but at least give us a chance to participate in some of this stuff. You know, when you're spending money, why don't you ask some of the people here, or have a discussion or a meeting like they have in the township and some of the other ones? I think I'm getting through to you. Monopoly, that's what you are. And I don't like a monopoly. I know there's
2 minutes,
ways to
sir.
get around it. Yeah, there's one way right there.
Thank you, Mr. Peltzer. Does anyone else wish to be heard? If so, get to the microphone and tell us your name and town, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Okay, doesn't look like anyone else wants to be heard, so we'll close public comments. Any other business? We don't have any. We have announcements and reminders. Remember, 2 weeks from today, we're down in New Buffalo at the Township Hall. We'll start at 6 p.m. And
Oh, BC Bit.
BC Bit's here. At what time?
At 12:30.
12:30. Okay, does anybody have any other things for announcing, or birthdays, anniversaries, or no? Okay. All right, we're done next Thursday, 8:35. Thank you.